Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to cover topic 11, the circulatory system. In this unit, you will learn number 1, the human transport system called the circulatory system. Number 2, why the human body needs to have a system to transport materials. Number 3, what the circulatory system consists of. Number 4, how the organs and tissues work together to complete the circulatory system. Before we move on, let's do a recap session from our previous topic. We covered neutralization, learning objective 14.2. The learning objective number 1 states that we needed to define neutralization. Neutralization is a chemical reaction where an acid and an alkali reacts to form a salt and water only. Number 2, we needed to state the word equation for neutralization, which is acid plus alkali. We have to draw an arrow, and then we'll write down salt plus water. Number 3, explain the importance of neutralization in daily life. One of the main examples was antacids, and antacids are actually, even though the name says acids there, they're actually made up of alkali, which helps to neutralize acids that are found in our stomach and can cause indigestion or heartburn. Other examples are number 1, treatment of insect bites, number 2, cleaning teeth using toothpaste, number 3, using shampoo and conditioner, and number 4, reducing soil acidity. Now let's move on to the circulatory system, learning objective 11.3. The learning objective for today is number 1, identify the main parts of the heart and the main blood vessels. We need to talk about the 4 chambers of the heart. We need to talk about the main blood vessels, which is the pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, aorta, and vena cava. We also have to talk about the valves that can be found in the heart itself. Number 2, state the function of the heart. And number 3, briefly describe the transport, aka circulatory system, in human beings with reference to the heart and blood vessels. Step to success for today is number 1, name and label the main parts of the heart. Number 2, write and say in words what is the job of the heart. Number 3, write and say in words how the heart and the blood vessels are actually involved in the circulatory system. Before we start, let's do a bit of introduction on why the circulatory system is actually important. So the first point we need to make is that mammals are multicellular organisms. What do we mean by that? Multicellular organisms are organisms that are made up of more than one living cells. It can even go up to millions of cells. All of these organisms here, we have animals, plants, and insects. They are multicellular organisms. A good example is if we look under the microscope and look at their blood. So that is a microscope, a real one, picture of the cat blood cells and also rabbit blood cells. Leaves don't have blood because they're plants, so we're looking at plant leaf cells there. And here we have insect blood, aka the insect cells. So you can see that all of these organisms, although they are big and they have their own different types of structures and shape, but all of them are actually made up of tiny little cells. So each and every one of these cells are actually living. And what do they actually need? For all animal cells, we're going to focus on just animal cells here. To function and keep on living, they need oxygen, glucose, and water. Glucose is a type of sugar that you can find in food. You would break down starchy food like potatoes and rice, and your body will actually get glucose. So now we're going to talk about why these things are important. So let's try to compare what animals need and what do animals do with it. As for oxygen and glucose, oxygen is actually going to be absorbed and used in the mitochondria of the cell. Glucose is also going to be used in the mitochondria. So in the mitochondria, oxygen and glucose will react. When they react together, they actually produce energy. And that process is what we call cellular respiration. Water is really important because water can act as a solvent, and it can actually help gases like oxygen and substances like glucose to dissolve. And why is dissolving these things important? It's because water can help to store and also transport those dissolved substances. There are many types of cells in the human body, so we have to take a closer look. Human beings are multicellular organisms, and we are made up of many cells and even different types of cells. These are the list of examples of types of cells that are found in the body. Muscle cells make up the heart, and endothelial cells are actually the cells that you can find lining the insides of blood vessels. You have pancreatic cells right here that can be found in the pancreas, and fat cells can be found under your skin. So they're right here, and it helps to prevent heat loss. Most of our cells are situated far away from each other. What does this mean? So it means that all our different types of cells are very far from each other because they are found in different parts of your body. And it's really important for all the cells to get all those, especially the three things: glucose, oxygen, and water. So that's why we need to have a transport system to transport all the important substances to all of the cells so that they can continue on living, surviving, and also carrying out their function. The transport system in mammals is specifically called the circulatory system. The circulatory system is made up of three parts. Number 1, the heart. Number 2, the blood vessels. And number 3, the blood. These are all drawings of all of these things, but you must be able to look at how it looks like in real life. So this is the human heart ready for transplant. Blood vessels under the microscope. This is what we call the human venule. So the venule is a very small vein, and it helps to transport the blood from the capillaries to the veins. And here is a microscope image of a blood smear. So that means you'll get a blood sample from someone, and you go look under the microscope. You can see here erythrocytes. If you guys remember from the worksheet, erythrocytes is the red blood cells, and you have the platelets right here. The heart has a specific function, and just to clarify, the heart is an organ. And remember that organs are groups of tissues working together for a specific function. The function of the organ, the heart, is to pump blood to all parts of the body. The heart is literally pumping and pushing with a type of force blood instead of water here. And instead of into a bucket, it actually pumps blood to all parts of the body. To help the heart do this, we need to learn about the structure of the heart and its main properties. Number 1, the size of the heart. The size of the heart is actually about the size of your fist. And the heart, for it to help pump blood, it is made up of muscle tissues. There are 4 chambers of the heart. If you look at this little picture right here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Chambers are kind of like rooms. So the upper chambers right here are actually called atria, or number 1, if it's singular, it's called atrium. So we have the right atrium on this side, and you have the left atrium on this side. You also get the right ventricle down here and the left ventricle down there. Ventricles are at the bottom parts of the heart. The heart muscles that you can find here at the lining here, they contract to help pump the blood. Contraction happens when the muscle cells shorten in length. And how does the heart receive blood? It actually relaxes. So when the muscle cells here relax, it's going to return back to its original length. There are many types of blood vessels that you can find that is connected to the heart. So it's not shown here, but instead here on the outside right there, those blood vessels are mainly called coronary blood vessels. The main one is called the coronary artery, which transports nutrients, so food and oxygen, to the muscles right here of the heart. There are also coronary vein, which returns the deoxygenated blood from the walls of the heart and also the waste product. So there's this new word called deoxygenated. Deoxygenated means that there is not a lot of oxygen in the red blood cells. So deoxygenated blood is a type of blood that you can get from body cells when they use up the oxygen and carry out respiration. The vena cava will receive this type of blood, and it actually transports the deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body towards the heart. And then you have the pulmonary artery. So the deoxygenated blood will then be transported to the lungs to become oxygenated, and pulmonary artery helps to do this. After reaching the lungs, that's when the blood becomes oxygenated instead. So it now has a lot of oxygen from the air. So we get the pulmonary vein to return the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. And now it's oxygenated, we want to give the oxygen to all parts of the body. So the aorta is a blood vessel that does this. It transports the oxygenated blood from the heart to all parts of the body. The main function of the heart is to contract and relax because it's a muscle cell. So muscle tissues, they actually have a function of contracting and relaxing. When they contract, they actually push. They have like this force, and they push the blood to different parts. And when they relax, that's when they receive blood. And blood, it's usually red in color, but you know that it's made up of different materials. So the blood can be divided into 3 parts. The yellowish liquid called plasma, and this contains 70% of water. And also the 30% is dissolved substances like gases, like carbon dioxide and oxygen, and dissolved nutrients like amino acid, glucose, and mineral calcium, and also waste products like urea. The clear liquid that you can find in blood is made up of white blood cells like phagocytes and lymphocytes, and also blood platelets. And the reddish liquid that you can find in blood actually comes from the color of the red blood cells. There are two shades of blood, usually. You can see here that it's much more brighter, and here it's much more darker. The bright color here is representing the oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood becomes bright red when oxygen binds to the hemoglobin of the red blood cells. Over here is deoxygenated blood, and in real life we call that deep red purple. But in diagrams we use blue instead because it's much more easier to differentiate between the deoxygenated versus oxygenated blood. So remember that in real life it's deep red purple, even though you can't really see that it's very purple here, but let's just call it deep red purple anyway. But in diagrams we use the color blue. So what happens during deoxygenated blood is that the oxygen will diffuse to the cells of the body. And the cells of the body, to carry out its function, it needs energy. So it uses up the oxygen during cellular respiration to make energy and release the waste gas carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide enters the red blood cell, and the red blood cell actually carries the carbon dioxide to the lungs. And this is when they become deoxygenated blood. So when we look at the diagram of the heart, we need to look at the different sides of the heart. So to do this, let's pretend that we have a patient in front of us. And this would be the right hand of the patient and the left hand of the patient. So naturally, this would be the right side of the heart. On the right side of the heart, you have these veins called the vena cava. The vena cava transports blood that it gets from the rest of the body. And the type of blood that it carries is actually deoxygenated blood. This vena cava brings blood into the first chamber of the heart called the right atrium. The right atrium has walls that is made up of muscle cells too. So the muscle tissues here will contract, opening up the valve here called the tricuspid valve, and it pushes the blood down into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is this chamber right here, and it's made up of a bit much more bigger, thicker wall. And here the muscles will then contract, so the walls of the right ventricle contract, and it will actually open up the semilunar valve there. And this will transport the deoxygenated blood to the pulmonary artery. So just to remind you, valves have this main function to prevent backflow of blood. So this means that it will prevent the blood from moving backwards. So when the right ventricle contracts, it's going to push the blood through the pulmonary artery that brings the blood towards the lungs. So this one right here will bring it to the right side of the lung. And at the right side of the lung, the red blood cells will then deposit by diffusion actually the carbon dioxide into the lungs. And this is when you breathe it out. So when you breathe out, carbon dioxide will then go into the air. And when you breathe in, you're going to have oxygen gas. And since there's high concentration of oxygen in the lungs, it's going to diffuse into the red blood cell. And red blood cell will then carry oxygen and becomes oxygenated. This also happens in the left side of the lung. So deoxygenated blood will become oxygen-rich, oxygenated blood. So this oxygen-rich blood will then enter the blood vessels right here, which is on the left side of the lung. This blood vessel right here is called the pulmonary vein. It returns oxygen-rich blood back to the heart, and it will then enter the left atrium. The left atrium is also made up of a muscular wall here, and it will contract, opening the bicuspid valve, and blood will then be pushed down into this part called the left ventricle. The left ventricle is very special because it's much more thicker than the right ventricle. Why is it thick? It's so that it can add more pressure so that the blood can be transported to all parts of the body. To do that, the left ventricle will contract and open up the semilunar valve that is found here too. Over here it's closed, but when the left ventricle contracts, it's going to open it up, and the blood will then be carried in the aorta, which is the main artery. Over here, the oxygen-rich blood, called oxygenated blood, will then be transported to all parts of the body, where it can be used during cellular respiration, and the cells can then perform its main function. So over here, you can see that there are these lines, and these are actually called tendons. Some diagrams may show it, and some might not. And I just wanted to show you as an extra over here. So that's all for today. Hope you guys have a good day. Thank you for watching.